Jimmy K here, Metal Voice. Look at this. The Metal Voice shirts are now on sale. Just go to the video description to find out on how you can purchase one. Metal! Welcome to the Metal Voice. Today on the show at 241, Thom Hazaert and Mr. David Ellefson. What's going on, guys?
How are you, man? What's going on?
Great. Thom, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Just hanging out in the office. I was actually working on a Sunday. What else? That's how we do in the Ellefson Empire. We just work all the time. Dave's over there in the studio recording the voiceover for our new book, and I'm over here, doing everything else.
Exciting news today. We get, again, not only do we have a 2-for-1, but we have a 2-for-1 coming out July 16th on Jawbone Press, More Life With Deth, and Sleeping Giants, a compilation LP with some new music. And I guess
Sleeping Giants is technically coming out July 19th through Combat and Amped. And the book comes out on the 16th and the record comes out on the 19th. So same week, same.
So this is a collaboration, right? The book and the CD between you two guys. I guess my first question to both of you is the difference. What's the difference between this book and the last book?
Thom, I'll let you answer it.
All right. We both probably have different answers to this question. I mean, look, this book, the first book, I got both back there right on the shelves. The first book I think was, a little more focused on, David's spirituality and his sobriety. And it talked about Megadeth and a little bit of kind of the, generic backstory. It didn't really get too deep into a lot of Megadeth stuff. It's a great book, but again, it's a little more, it was a lot of stuff about David's spirituality and his sobriety, and that was really where he was at that time. And this time we set out, I think, to make just a rock and roll book. I bugged David for a couple years to write this book. I'm like, dude, let's do another book. And then it just happened, and it really organically became what it was. David started writing some chapters. He's a machine. I mean, he just started spitting out chapters every day. He'd be like, I wrote 4 more chapters. I wrote 3 more. And I'm like, and then I started writing my stuff. And it really, this one, I say it all the time, the early Megadeth days and David's growing up in Jackson was covered in the first book. But I always say with this, it's like a superhero movie. You have to tell the origin story every time. So this one, with our relaunch of Combat Records, it gave us the opportunity to segue back to the beginning again and really tell that origin story of Megadeth. And this time, we have some other voices in the book too. Brad Schmidt and Jay Reynolds, who played in the band for a minute, and Greg Handevid, who was one of the very early guitar players and one of David's best friends from back home. So I think we really did a good job of chronicling the early Megadeth history, but with some other people that were there to sort of quantify what's talked about and really give a different perspective and validate everything being said.
So actually, it's a good point there, Thom. I noticed in the book that as the chapters were progressing, and I did read the book, the whole thing, there were guest writers chronologically talking about their perspective on the time periods. And it does connect the dots from today's empire, we'll call it, of Ellefson Empire, to how it all, I guess, like Combat is an example, right, Dave? How you started off with Combat and how today Thom was the one who sort of like secured a deal with the name Combat. Care to talk about that connection?
Sure. It's funny, right as you guys were calling me to do this interview, Kiko, I'm in my voiceover man cave here at the house in Nashville where we're working on the Megadeth album. And I just finished doing the audiobook, my portion of it, and we're fortunate to have a lot of the guests are giving us their audio contributions on the book. So when you hear the audiobook, we're actually going to put it up for pre-order probably sometime by July 1st, hopefully, on Audible. And what's nice about that is people from all around the world can get that book, because not everybody can get the book if they don't have a distributor in that country. Obviously, you can order it through EMP merch and all this kind of stuff. But the audiobook is nice because everybody can listen to that. And it's so it's funny. Kiko was just here finishing his part of it, and he commented to me yesterday. He said, it's really cool how you have all these other people telling the story, to go along with it. And it's funny because I don't always tell the story accurately. Like Mark Menke, he goes, dude, you had something, there was a typo on something or this information. I was like, hey man, I'm just going by memory. And that's why I had you come in to help, tell your version of what happened, because he saw other things I didn't. Same with Kiko. He said, actually Angra did not open the show in Sao Paulo. I actually just came in as a guest because Gus G wasn't there. So it's cool to hear the other versions of that and fill in the color, because. And also, I think one thing that helps me is it's not just a story of me, more about me, look at my life. I like it to be a community thing. I'm very much a collaborative guy. And I think that's probably Thom and I, our friendship, our business relationship is always one built on collaboration and partnership. And the combat thing you mentioned certainly being one of the big ones in our empire here is the night. I never forget. I was sitting in Scottsdale, the town where I live, in a parking lot of an Office Max. I was ready to go inside, and Thom calls me all excited. Oh my God, you're not going to believe what I just did today. And I'm like, well, now what? And did you get arrested or what happened?
You never know.
Yeah. And he said, dude, I think we can secure the name Combat Records. And I was like, oh man, really, that of all things, because we had such a horrible experience with Combat, Megadeth did. And then as Thom, explained to me and gave me the hard sell on why it was cool, fortunately, Capitol Records came in, bought out our contract, and we moved on to much bigger things after that as a major label band. And so I kind of missed a lot of the years of Combat, and quite honestly, largely was a house Megadeth built, by us getting signed over, to a bigger label. But that really, the influence that label had to a whole generation of punk and thrash fans, and then to for us to secure that and have that it really did on this book, as Thom just said, it provided through the narrative of this book as we were writing it, as I started talking about Combat, it suddenly took me all the way back to 1984, 83 and 84, especially 84 with Megadeth, because that was when we started having conversations with record labels to sign Megadeth, and Combat was the one that won out and that we ended up signing to, and that's what Killing Is My Business came out on. And so it largely took me back to telling the earliest years of the Megadeth story, and that is a period of time that there's not a lot of information on. These fans have found some awesome pictures. I sometimes will tag them like on Instagram or social media, and I'll reshare them. And I'll do it under every bass as a story, which is how our whole bass story concept kind of spun out of that last year, around the 35 years of Megadeth campaign. And so, in our world, for me and Thom, everything builds off of the thing before it and the things around it. We never segregate and separate things out. Everything is just this constantly collaborative building of goodwill and good things, and I think that largely is the story that's inside of this book, is how that happens and how you too can do that. Yeah. A lot of that is just saying yes. We get scared in life, we're afraid of things, we pull back rather than push forward, and I think Thom and I have a great partnership with that we really inspire each other, we encourage, we push each other. And even the great public achievements that I've made in my life, I still need to be managed. I need to be produced. I need to be groomed. I need to be collaborated with. I am not God, and I'm not the be-all, end-all. So I love that we have a very cool friendship and a business partnership like that.
So let's pause right there, and I'm going to ask Thom this. Thom, how did you guys get together? And I think this is important. And I mean, we can go back to the Combat years, but how did you first connect? And I know I read the book, so I know how you guys connected, but just for everybody else to know, how did you connect with Dave back in the day?
So me and David originally met when David, in his time away from Megadeth, he was the head of global artist relations, I think was his title, but he was the A&R guy for Peavey. And in another life, I was a manager. I managed Chimera and Skin Lab and some other bands that were, Peavey artists. And so I had some dealings with Dave through that, at Peavey through his A&R role there. And then 4 or 5 years ago, I produced and directed some special features for Scream Factory and Shout Factory for, they do all the special edition Blu-rays. And, I did some stuff for People Under the Stairs and Army of Darkness and Return of the Living Dead. And so I found out they were doing Shocker. And I said, look, you have to let me do something about the soundtrack. And so basically I talked them into letting me do a 30-minute mini, short film documentary about the Shocker soundtrack. So, I talked to Bruce Kulick and Kane Roberts and Jason McMaster and I reached out to Megadeth management. They completely blew me off, and I reached out to David directly on social media, and he said yeah. So he ended up being in that, and it came out on the Shocker Blu-ray, and it's awesome. And through that we kind of reconnected, and he's like, hey, what are you doing now? I'm like, oh, I'm still managing bands and producing. He's like, oh, me too. So I brought David one of my bands, Horizon Chaos. He produced some stuff on the record. We kind of bonded a little more with that. He was way into the band, and that was when the talk of EMP was starting. And so that was it, man. It all kind of snowballed from there. It turned into me and David kind of partnering on EMP and building it into what it was, and Combat sort of, built off of that. And, it's so funny you ask about Combat, because literally, I remember where I was when me and David had that conversation too. I was literally in the backyard of my house. It wasn't even my house then. It was before I even lived here. I was over here. My sister lived here before me, and I was over here for a barbecue. And I literally remember having that conversation with David on the phone, which is funny. So that just shows what a pivotal moment it was. And I think we both knew it because we both remember exactly where we were when we had the conversation. But yeah, I mean, David, it was so funny in doing the book because, Megadeth's experience, David's experience with Combat, they were kind of the guinea pig, man. Combat was very early when they did Megadeth. And, but they kind of made Combat a real label because all the band, I spoke, kind of a lot to Juan Garcia from Body Count, who was an Abattoir, and some other bands on Combat, and TKO. And it's funny, other bands that were on Combat had a great experience there, so I think Megadeth was just so early on that the label was just kind of trying to find their footing, same as Megadeth was. But I think all the bands later on had a very different experience with Combat. That was way more obviously, they had all that Megadeth money to throw around to everybody else. So thanks, Dave. I'm sure the rest of the Combat roster appreciates it.
It's interesting because this book is about, in a way, it's about surviving, Dave. You start off with Megadeth, of course, and now you find yourself, you're not in the band. I mean, when you weren't in the band, a lot of people ask me this, why isn't Dave in the band anymore? And I mean, if you were to answer that question, what would it be? You're in Megadeth, you're having a lot of success with the band. Was it the drugs? What was it? What was the breaking point?
Dave quit the band. He folded up the band, and I mean, he basically quit. So again, if he quit, we don't have a quarterback, no one's there to throw the ball. So essentially the band was done. 2004, he reformed the group, but suddenly all the business dealings were changed and everything was different, and I was not on board with it. So I didn't agree to it, and they basically moved forward without me being part of that. And initially I think it was kind of like, well, let's find just a way to figure that out. And of course, that turned into, as often does when there's money and deals and contracts, lawyers are involved, and next thing you know, you're, having legal disputes, and that's just kind of part of business I've learned over the years. But, it was weird because before the group ended, I thought, it's funny, in my early sobriety, they told me, they said, David, there's only one thing you have to change in your life in order to stay sober, and that's everything. And I went, whoa, yeah. And it's a tall order, and I've now seen that to be true. And it's interesting because I was sitting in church with my friend Billy Smiley, who I talked about in the book. He played in a band, a big Christian band called Whiteheart, with Dan Huff, who produced a couple of Megadeth records for us in the late 90s here in Nashville. And I was sitting in church, and it was literally the first week of February of 2002, and that thought hit me. I went, oh my gosh, Like, the only thing I haven't changed is Megadeth. And literally 2 days later, Dave calls me and quits the band. And I just kind of went, well, there's that answer, you know. And part of me was, you know, kind of relieved, because it was a lot. I mean, Dave and I had been going almost 20 years at that point, and it was a lot, you know. And everybody knows sort of the other side of that story and other members' history and story, and it's just a lot, you know. You're creative people. Megadeth's a real rock and roll band, man. It's dangerous. It's dynamic. It's charismatic. It's all the great things that make great rock and roll, you know. But the train always ready to careen off the frickin' track at any given moment, you know what I mean? And while that makes great theater and rock and roll on the other side, when you're in the band on this side, it's a lot, man. And so, you know, and on one hand, I was kind of like, you know what, Dave needs to step away. Good. He needs, if that is what he needs to kind of, you know, do some things for his life and that, and then, you know, God bless you, move on, you know. So I just kind of moved on. I just got busy with my life and moved on. I wasn't going to sit around and cry about it. I was a young man with a young family. I was in my 30s. And, you know, we'd made money. We'd done some things, but I was young. I wasn't ready to retire. You know, I wasn't done with my life's purpose. And, you know, again, young families are expensive, and, you know, there's a lot of life ahead, you know. So I had to roll up my sleeves and get to work. And I think that largely is the story of the next phase of my life is in the book. I talked about it in my previous book, in My Life With Deth. I talked about it there too. But I think the lessons I learned from that season, from 2002 to 2010, when I came back into Megadeth, you know, that there's now bigger lessons. And I think those are the things that Thom was encouraging me to write about in this book, because not only did I come back to Megadeth, and then that relationship was healed and mended, and, you know, and obviously the fans we're all excited about it, me coming back, and we're back together again. But during that journey, now this is a new season, you know, and in that season, especially once Thom and I met in, you know, 2000, what is that, 5 or so, or 6 or whatever that was,
like that, 2000,
you know, what,
mid 2000s, probably.
Yeah,
early,
2000, you know, all of a sudden a lot developed from that. And you know, one of the things that changed is when my son came home and asked me to be a judge at to be the celebrity judge at a high school talent show. You know, seemingly just, you know, time with my son at the school, just hanging out, and all of a sudden this one band, Dalskin, showed up. And, you know, it's amazing how, you know, they, you know, just saying yes to one or two little things in life that, you know.
And you talk about that, saying yes, right? And you talk about that
yes
in the book. Say yes. There are more opportunities, right? When you say yes in life.
The book starts off with the opportunity, or with that, basically that thread on page 1 of the book. My friend Dale Steele, who was a singer in F5, still a dear friend of mine, and a conversation he and I had the day I came back to Megadeth, and that's the downbeat of the book, and that, you know, that's that story, or that theme of say yes, you know, and be, you know, be present, and just kind of just go for it, you know.
One thing about the book, it said, what was your Megadeth album? Thom, what was your Megadeth album?
My Megadeth.
I'll tell you what, you know what mine was? Before you answer yours, mine was Kill 'Em All. But that was my Megadeth album, because that's when I started listening to Megadeth, on Kill 'Em All. But go ahead, Thom, what was your Megadeth album?
Jeez.
So far, so good. So what? You can see it right there.
Yeah. There's coffee, right, that I promote on my show all the time, right? Yep. There's the coffee. There's the EMP label group. Is that what it's called? Yeah. EMP label group, which and you could just like throw out some names there that bands that are on it.
You know, new records for Mark Slaughter, Autograph, Doyle, a couple of records for Dalskin, who David manages and now signed to Hopeless. We just put out the new Last Crack record, which is literally their first record in 25 years. Yeah, well, a lot of stuff, and we've put out like 6-year Sword.
Yeah, well, my friends, Rick Hughes, my friend here in Montreal. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and then technically they're on Combat, you know. So, I mean, Combat is Hatchet, Sword, Wrath. I mean, it's a lot of these cool legacy bands. You know, there's some young bands but even Hatchet's been around. I call them a young band. They've been around for 15 years. They put out like 4 records before ours, you know. So it's really become, you know, building, you know, it's really kind of come around to finding these legacy artists that we really like and believe in. Killer Dwarfs, another great Canadian legendary band. It really comes down to just shit I liked and grew up on, and David likes. Like when I called David about Sword, I'm like, hey, do you remember this band Sword that was on comedy? He's like, dude, I love Sword. He's like, that record Metalized was the only record me and Mustaine listened to on the bus on P-Cells. I'm like, well, I just signed them, So it's, it's great when David shares that enthusiasm and excitement. So EMP, Combat, and obviously now, David has his Jackson basses. We have, we just launched a new signature processor with ISP, the David Ellefson Beta Bass Pro. We're launching a pedal with Kirk Hammett's company, KHDK, the David Ellefson Fallout. We did a signature strap with Groove Gear. We have our merchandise company, Merch Live. We have our studio in Tampa, Master Sound. We're launching a food truck in Tampa. Grilling is my business. I mean, it's really turned into this crazy branding thing, but we don't just put David's name on anything. We have a whole CBD line we just did through Combat, and we did the Ellefson Coffee CBD collaboration with Flower Power. I mean, it's been real selective though, but it's all about going out and actively finding opportunities. We don't just sit down and wait for shit. I mean, again, this is all years of going out and really finding the right opportunities. Sure, some things come your way and you have to say yes, but you also got to go out, and I guess that's sort of my role in this whole thing, is going out and creating these opportunities and being the Willy Wonka of it. And
I'm just going to give everybody the overall summary of this. It's basically Dave leaving Megadeth, rebuilding his name, and I guess with everything you've mentioned, as well as, the story behind the first, I guess, 3 albums, right? It was, right, Dave? It was it the first 3 albums?
My business. Yeah, the early lineups. Really kind of, my, coming from Minnesota, that enthusiasm to get to Hollywood, getting to Hollywood and going, oh shit, what did I just do? What a departure that was from the farm life and the Minnesota, not just farm life, but the Minnesota, the tri-state, area that I had worked, of South Dakota, Iowa, and Minnesota that I had worked and our friend Mary Jane. That, and then moving to Hollywood and Dave and I meeting and, Megadeth forming, and then through the first 3 albums, Killing Is My Business, Peace Sells, into So Far So Good So What, which really leads us right up to pretty much the turn of the decade into 1990.
Actually, that was my favorite part, Dave. I just love that inside information. And for everybody who wants to read this book, definitely, worth it in terms of, getting behind the scenes and sort of the making of the albums. And actually, I kind of like the part for Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. You guys are just like stranded somewhere. I don't know if it was in the Midwest or in the West Coast. And you just called up the record company and go, hey, guys, we're kind of stranded here. And maybe you want to just touch on that for like,
yeah, no, we're in Kansas City. I mean, broke is broke. The Killing Is My Business tour is actually the Kill for Thrills tour. 1985, June, July, where we're opening for label mates Exciter, also Canadians.
Yes, good friends. Yeah,
out of Ottawa. And the tour, the dates were just canceling left and right because the agent was just horrible. And which is where we met our next agent, Andy Summers, through this process. And he fortunately came in and helped kind of salvage the back end of it and, took us on to bigger things after that tour. But yeah, we called the label, said, look, we are broke as broke. My dad gave me a credit card with like a $500 limit on it, and I never used it. I just never wanted to call home for money. I wanted to be on my own 2 feet. And so we basically, as cars started breaking down and we were broke and tour dates were canceling, that credit card financed the Killing Is My Business tour. And we called the label and they said, you guys just need to go home and get jobs. And we were like, what? It's like, we're on a tour supporting your album, right? That we're signed to your label. And fortunately there were these kind young ladies who, were like, basically we bought a hibachi so we could make hamburgers and hot dogs down in the parking lot of Motel 6.
They didn't have George Foreman grills.
Yeah. And I think they bought the food and the beer and the cigarettes because we couldn't afford them that night, So, I mean, that was the beauty of being on tour is, you knew you were going to get, some food, some loving, some beer, and all your other needs taken care of, you know, basic primal human needs, you know, back in the day. And, you know, coming home off tour was always a nightmare for me. Like, where am I going to live? I have no place to live. I'm in LA. I'm broke. I have nowhere to live. And fortunately, there was always, you know, somebody, young lady or otherwise, who would take you in for, you know, a season till you got back on tour. I mean, that was just kind of the understood, unspoken rule of rock and roll in Hollywood back in those days. I mean, it's, but Jay Reynolds, who's also in the book, was a dear friend of mine, and, you know, almost played guitar with us, or did play guitar with us for just a, you know, a short period was we were putting together So Far So Good So What. You know, he and I, like, he knew the hustle. I mean, he was kind of my brother from another mother too. And he knew the hustle around Hollywood, and you know, helped me survive it, man. Because, you know, Dave and I obviously were partners, and you know, in and through all this. And Dave's a street survivor. I mean, he'd been on his own since he was a teenager, and so he knew the hustle and how to survive California and L.A. But you know, it took a village of us, you know, because, you know, it's. Whenever we got cigarettes, we shared them. When we got hamburgers, we shared them. When we got drugs, we shared them. You know, just what you did. When you had girls, you shared them. You know, that's just kind of what you did back in the day. And you know, that's a whole different time. I mean, you know, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, Megadeth, all of us growing up in the, you know, back in the Hollywood days, man. I mean, that was just, it was, I think, you know, I love The Dirt, the Motley movie, The Dirt. It's great. I mean, it seems dramatic. It's not. That was just a day in the life for all of us back in the day. You know? And that was how Hollywood rolled, man. It was that, man. And
well, it's so funny. And David's told me this story that scene in The Dirt where Nikki overdoses. Dave was there that night.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, I wrote about it in my first book, in my Life with Deth, and I was there. You know, Steven Adler and I were friends, and I didn't really know the other guys too much. I think maybe met Slash once or something, but we really didn't. You know, me and Steven were buddies, and so he was right up the street from where Dave and I met on Sycamore. It was at the Franklin Plaza Hotel up on Franklin and La Brea, and yeah, I was up there, and Fred Curry was actually from Cinderella, was filling in for Steven because Steven broke his arm. And wow. Guns had just gotten off the Girls tour with Motley, so they were buddies and hanging out and partying a lot. And Nikki and I have become dear friends over the years. And it's I'd never met Nikki before, any of the Motley guys, and we're just partying, and Slash and Nikki come busting into the room, and so, you know, I wanted to see if I could, you know, wedge some drugs off of them, but they didn't have any. So I guess they were looking for some too. You know, that was kind of what happened at the wee hours of the night. And they left and went in the room next door. And I mean, literally, I don't know, 15 minutes later, the girl comes running. Oh my God, Nikki's dead. Get some ice. You know, like you could hear the helicopters, you could hear the sirens. I mean, it was all going on. And you know, Fred looked at me, he goes, "You got a car? Get me the hell out of here." You know, so we took him down to the Hyatt on Sunset and got him out of there. And yeah, it was pretty hardcore stuff, man. It was, you know, thank God I really wasn't around it. I mean, I had no part of it or anything, but it was just a brush by a moment in rock and roll that it was a sobering reality and a wake up, you know, that it's, you know, we were all toying with the dark side and the dark stuff and the stuff that took us all to the edge, you know, and you know,
how accurate was it to the film? Like in the film, you know, they already had like reports.
I mean, again, I wasn't in the room with Nikki when that happened. Fortunately, I wasn't, you know, part of that. But, you know, I was, you know, again, just had seen him 15 minutes before, and
crazy.
You know, yeah, it was, you know, again, everybody's there. That's what happened. You know, it's like being at a party. You know, no one expects to fall off the roof of the house and hit their head in the swimming pool, or you know, crash the car and do dumb stuff at parties. But that's what happens. You know, and you know, I guess the silver lining of that is then 9 months later, that same management company, McGee Entertainment, had managed Megadeth, and Nikki was now sober. He was 9 months sober, and they'd written Dr. Feelgood, and their manager brought Nikki over to the rehab where I was at, and Nikki was kind enough to sit down, and man, a changed man. I mean, he looked like he does now. I mean, he looked like $1 million, clean, sober, kicking ass, healthy, in great shape, and it's just like, wow, like, you know, what a difference sobriety makes, you know, and it would be about a year or so later, and I finally got clean, You know,
I want to talk about your drug addiction in a moment, but I want to ask Thom about this record because we haven't touched about the record yet. So,
Yeah.
so Thom, tell me about, and I know I'm going back and forth. It's just because there's a lot to talk about here.
There's a lot of ground.
Okay, so Thom, tell me about this record. So we have new songs that you're singing on that you wrote with Dave and produced. We have F5 demos, and we also have a compilation, right, of the bands on EMP
there's
and Combat.
a bonus disc, the CD. So the CD is a 2 CD with a bonus disc of Combat and EMP artists. A lot of them are kind of relevant to the book. Green Death and Horizon Chaos and Dalskin, who are the first 3 bands that started EMP. Last Cracks on it, Hatchet, Mark Slaughter, Doyle. I mean, but yeah, no, it's great. I mean, look, the record was totally an accident. It was basically, we were out on the Bass Story tour last year. I was getting up every night and doing a couple songs with David. And we have a studio in Tampa called Master Sound. And we're like, let's go in the studio and just write a song for fun. Let's just go do it. So we went in the studio with Dave Sharp and Opus from Dead by Wednesday and jammed for 20 minutes. And Dave had the riff for Vultures. And we wrote the song in literally, a half an hour, Dave? And then we tracked it that night, basically. We recorded that. And Opus and Dave retracked their parts over like the live recording, and then Dave went in and tracked his rhythm guitar and his bass, and I tracked the vocals that same day, and it was done. And we were just, look, let's just take it, let's include it as a free download with the book or something. It's cool that me and David did a song together, ties in with the book. And then David had all these other really cool songs, Sleeping Giants and Hammer Comes Down, that were just kind of laying around in various instrumental versions. I think a couple of them, Dale from F5 had done a version with some vocals, and David was like, write something for these. So I'm like, okay. So me and Dave were talking. He's like, I talked to DMC. I'm like, hey, we're going to do this shit for our book. You want to be on a song? And David called me and he goes, dude, Sleeping Giants, that'd be perfect with DMC, with kind of that bass line and the cadence. And I'm like, dude, that's it. So I called DMC. Me and him wrote Sleeping Giants. And then Hammer Comes Down was always my favorite song. It's one that reminded me of like a So Far So Good So What, Peace Sells era Megadeth song. It was just a super thrashy killer tune. So, I went and wrote some stuff on it. We got Eric A.K. to come in and do the chorus on it from Flotsam, which was super cool. And that was literally just, I was writing it and I was frustrated with the chorus. And David goes, we need something else. I go, yeah, we do. So he called up Eric A.K. He came in that night and we wrote that chorus. He sang it and it was awesome, But then we ended up getting Mark Tremonti to play on it. Dave McLean played drums on it. Chris Poland. David reconnected with Chris Poland, and that's the real story, I think, on that song is Dave and Chris Poland playing together on something really something commercially released for the first time since Peace Sells, right? I mean,
Back to Combat.
And also I think, tying AK from Flotsam and Jetsam, because I talk in there about our first tour to Europe in 1987. We had a manager had managed both Megadeth and Flotsam and Jetsam. We shared a double-decker bus. It was like a 4-city tour that we did over there. And the Flotsam guys, when Jason Newsted was in the band, every time we'd go to Phoenix, like on the Killing Is My Business and Peace Sells tour, Flotsam would always be the opening band for us at a club called the Mason Jar down on Indian School Road, and so that's where I got to know Jason. So we knew the Flotsam guys, and of course we were all happy for Jason once he made the move up into Metallica, and I've remained friends with the Flotsam guys. In fact, we just did a Metal Legion show in Phoenix, and we invited the Flots guys up to jam with us. Steve Conley, who's also got a pretty big part in the early part of the book, because he was the guitar player in F5 with me. I actually referred him to the gig in Flotsam. So now he's the guitar player in Flotsam and Jetsam. So again, there's just all these great synergies and that I think really speak well to the musician lifestyle. I think lots of times musicians, we get really caught up in our notes, our fingerboard, dude, check out my licks. And, and it's like, man, so much of this is not about your licks. It's like, if you're in the room, we already know you can play. Like, we're way over you and trying to impress us with your licks. At this point, it's about being part of a bigger organizational movement, and I think that's a lesson I always try to get across to musicians on every level. I mean, there's big famous rock stars who just can't get out of their own way. I mean, they're stuck in their own. They got tunnel vision of what they see, and we see it. I mean, big bands members leave and falling outs and all kinds of crazy stuff, and you know, in our world, in our empire, man, it's about being part of the team.
Songs. Originally, we just had those 3 songs, and we were gonna just do a little download EP with the book. And then I kind of said, Dave, why don't we? You have to have some F5 demos, some other stuff. Why, you know? And so it turned into like a full-length album companion to the book. And originally, again, it was just gonna be those 3 songs, some kind of a download. And through the voodoo that I do, you know, eventually I just talked David into, we dug up all these extra, he had all these killer F5 demos that were never released. And then he's like, well, you know, I do have this song with John Bush. I'm like, are you fucking kidding? And he's like, well, and I have all these other songs with David Glenn Isley. And again, so I just kind of worked with the Sleeping Giants. It was kind of a B-sides. It's all these cool rarities from David's career that all tie into the book and what's going on there. And that's what's so interesting about it when you really see the whole picture, you know.
Dave, I wanted to ask you about Jeff Waters. I know you just kind of mentioned Jeff Waters. Well, I've interviewed Jeff many times here in Montreal and Ottawa, actually. What was like, I mean, at one time you guys considered him as the guitarist of you know, you wanted to at least to hire him as a guitarist as a Megadeth. What happened? What didn't happen? And, you know, any future plans?
Often I've been the guy in the band who's, because I'm a pretty friendly, outgoing guy, I'd hang and I hobnob and network and just become friends with the people in the community, you know. As I mentioned, Dimebag Darrell and Jeff Waters in the book, you know, and even again, Jay Reynolds, you know, this kind of the, you know, the cast of characters that I hang with. And, you know, I'm a rock and roll guy, man. I like hanging out with other rock and roll musicians. That's what I do. Those are my friends. And I was a huge fan of Alice in Hell. I mean, that record is just awesome. And you know, when it came up for who are we going to get to replace Jeff Young, Dime came up, and he wasn't even Dime. He was Diamond Darrell. That was his name. Yeah. He was just this young little fledgling guitar star. He was in a lot of the magazines. This was Pantera when they were on the Power Metal album, which is my Pantera, by the way. You know, if you're gonna have my, that's my Pantera. And that was when I met them the summer of '88. So I'd recommended to Dave. I said, listen, there's this guy, you know, Darrell. He's great. So we called him. But you know, they came as a pair. You know, Darrell and Vinny. You know, and we had Chuck Wheeler as a drummer. So that didn't work out. And then I mentioned Jeff Waters, and obviously a great player. But Jeff was in a much different headspace back then too. I mean, Jeff is a kick-ass rock star lead guitar player, and he's the founder of his band. He's the writer. I mean, he's the whole musical muscle of that group. And, you know, for him to leave that would mean to leave all of his work behind to come and be the guitar player in Megadeth. And he didn't want to do it. And I don't blame him. At the time, his band was taking off. I think they just got signed to Roadrunner or something. Yeah. I mean, they were doing very well. And, right guy, wrong time. And now we talk about it. It's funny, you know, like, Jeff, he'd be a great lead guitar player in Megadeth. And he's friends with me and Dave. Now we're good buddies and everything. But, you know, so sometimes things just aren't meant to happen, you know, at that particular time. So, but, you know, the friendships that come out of that over the years are great, you know, and really good. And quite honestly, that's how it happened with Kiko. I was down in South America doing this Metal All-Stars tour, and I'd met Kiko once before. We had done a signing when Chris Broderick was in Megadeth. We did a signing at Diadario at Winter NAMM in Anaheim, and Kiko was there. It was nice to meet him because he was he in my mind was like the John Petrucci of South America, because Angra was the dream theater of South America. This very respected, very big and successful, progressive, you know, heavy metal, metal rock act, you know. And Kiko's a wonderful guy, and so in late 2014, I went down to South America for these 2 shows, and Kiko, Angra opened the show in Bolivia, and Kiko was brought in. Gus G didn't end up coming out for the tour because of the promoter, quite honestly, and so Kiko filled in, and that's how Kiko and I got to share the stage and play. And I was like, man, this guy can freaking play, and he's an animal on stage, and cool guy. We exchanged numbers and, you know, emails. And again, that's what musicians do. We get each other's numbers. We hang, you know. And he told me, he said, look, I just moved to LA. I'm looking for, you know, probably maybe a bigger opportunity to come my way. And literally 2 months later, Dave calls me up, and after we tried the whole Rust in Peace reunion, fell apart. You know, it just didn't happen, as me and Dave kind of thought it might not. And once that all went away, Dave called me a few weeks later and said, "Hey, I think I found our guitar player." And I said, "Who is it?" And he said, "Kiko." And I said, "Yeah, I love Kiko." He goes, "You know him?" I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, he said, "Do you want to reach out to him?" I said, "Yeah." So I had his information. So, again, say yes, network.
Can I ask, Dave, can I ask you about your drug issues?
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
how long were you like? And you touch on this in the book, but
yeah.
I think it's important. I'll tell you why it's important, because there's other people in the same situation who think they're hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
you came out of it, with flying colors. You prove that, with some serious addictions, you can not only change your life, but you could change it, for the much better, right? And a lot of people don't have that hope. So,
well, I always looked down on drugs and alcohol. I was in bands as a kid in Minnesota, and I remember one time I was always around older musicians. I was always a young guy who always got called up into the ranks of the older musicians. And I remember one time we had this kid, I think I was in like 8th grade, and this kid was in 9th grade, and he was our singer, and all he did is smoke pot and forget the lyrics. It's like, dude, you got one job to do. Remember the lyrics. And he couldn't remember the lyrics, And even some of my buddies, as they were playing, no, not Frank. Frank's not.
I'm like a proud mother over here.
Stop it, Mom. Stop. But and even I watch guys that I would play with, and they would drink, and suddenly their playing became sloppy, and I didn't like it. It bummed me out, because I worked very hard, I practiced a lot, and we rehearsed a lot, and we worked hard to be as good as we could be as a bunch of teenagers, and but then the day came when I drank, and it sort of opened that up, and it unleashed that beast within, and I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. Now I understand. And, fortunately I was on the, drug and alcohol train for 10 years. And in the beginning it was a lot of fun. I mean, I wouldn't have kept doing it if it wasn't, so it was a lot of fun. It was kind of the social lubricant, everyone around doing it. But I moved to LA in '83. I mean, cocaine was on the cover of Time magazine that year. I mean, it was it was quite popular in Hollywood, especially. And when I got to LA in '83, I mean, it was game on, man. I mean, just everything was good. I mean, Motley had gotten signed, taken off. Rat and Quiet Riot was #1 on MTV. I mean, the US Festival was happening. Judas Priest were huge. I mean, it was the era. That was the '80s, just kind of the epitome of sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the '80s. And I was a young man, and into rock and roll, and I loved it. I'm not going to complain about it at all. It was an awesome season of my life, but on like a lot of good things, if a little's good, more must be better. That didn't really apply, and I hit a wall, So by the time I was 23 on the So Far So Good So What album cycle, and it's what I talk about in the book, that's when I hit the wall, and I had to get clean, or it was all going to go away, and and that's the process, and I talk about it in the book. Getting out of it, and it's not morose, it's not a dark, horrible thing, because fortunately I came out the other side of it. But it's a thing that I continue. It's a lifestyle I continue to this day. And one of the kind of cool things about it is being on a magic carpet of Megadeth, for instance, and their bass story, and the other things that we do. We travel the world, and I'm able to talk either publicly or privately with people about it. It
inspires.
It's a cool platform to be able to help people if people reach out and need help. I mean, I will always take the time to stop everything and do that, because I know what that's like. I mean, I had some pretty famous people calling me when I was in the deepest, darkest days of my addiction. And I remember one guy called me, and it's funny, he was a hero of mine growing up, and he's calling me, he's on the phone, and he's sober, and I'm not, and all I could think is like, I hope this call doesn't take too long, because I'm waiting for my drug dealer to call. You know what I mean? I mean, talk about losing the plot, right? And losing perspective. And that was really a moment when I just went, man, I've really got to make some changes, Unfortunately, we had a great manager that I talk about in the book who helped me. I mean, I owe my life to him. I mean, he and the team that he put together around us in late '89, early '90, that helped me turn the corner and get and stay sober.
To this day, does the addiction still linger?
Well, the addiction's always in you. I mean, it never goes away, and I think that's the thing, is it's always there. You know, it's like diabetes or heart disease or something like that. It's always there. So yeah, you can't ever go back and poke the sleeping dragon, because it's always there. But a life, quite honestly, some people, I want my life back. It's like, you know what? I don't want my life back. Take it. This is about growing into a new life, and I think that's largely what the story of these books are. Is it's about the new life that developed. And quite honestly, you kind of get, as a sober, recovered addict, you kind of get to have two lives in one lifetime, which is the beauty of it. And, and I, again, say yes, give back, G-O-D, good orderly direction, all that stuff I talk about in my books. Those are the lessons that I've learned through that. And, and it's one day at a time. I mean, not white knuckle, oh my God, I hope I don't drink one day at a time, because that problem's been removed. But it's about, just being grateful and life is about people. No man is meant to be an island unto himself, and it's always about being engaged in life, engaged with other people. The good Lord put other people here because we're supposed to be in community with them, and we're supposed to be working with them. And that's the thing about drug addiction, is it isolates you, it pulls you out, because when it has you alone, that's when it can kill you. And that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to take everything from you. And you're right. I'm very fortunate that I was able to hit a bottom. My spirit hit the bottom before my body did, because when the body's done, the body goes, and then there's nothing you can do. So fortunately, mine was a spiritual death before it became a physical death.
All right.
I think that's one of the, and that's really been an important thing with both of us. We're both sober guys, and we go on tour together, and there's a whole community. I mean, look, there's been times kids reach out to me that I know in bands, and they're struggling with heroin, they're struggling with drugs. I put them on a three-way call with David, and they go, holy fuck, you know what I mean? And I think we do a lot of stuff with Music Cares. Actually, we're doing an event with them in New York where we're going to talk about the book and sobriety and about the community of it. And I think that's such an important, people come up to David all the time after reading the last book at events and at shows and at signings and go, your book changed my life. It gave me, the courage to beat my alcoholism, to beat my addictions. And I think that's such an important part of David's message. And I think that's why we kept it in this book too. But, at the same time, we didn't want it to all be about that, but it's just all of those messages kind of coexisting. But I think the sobriety thing is such an important part of David's message, and how he uses his platform in Megadeth and everything else to support people and support recovery. I mean, to me, is one of the most amazing things about the guy, you know what I mean? And about what we do. And it's an honor to be a part of that,
The book is going to be out July 16th, right? More Life
July 16th,
Death.
More Life with Death, right here. You can pre-order it now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, all major booksellers. You can go into Barnes & Noble and pre-order it.
Sleeping Giants, a compilation LP, upcoming as well. It would be released at the same time. Produced by Ellefson, of course, and you, Thom. In stores of guess July 19th. That's when the LP will come out, right? Or the album, or the CD, or the digital download.
It is, and it's awesome. This actually hasn't been announced yet, really, but we found out that we went to Metal Radio last week, and it's actually top 5 at Metal Radio too. So it's actually pretty exciting, man. People seem to be really responding well to it, and it's awesome.
So, last note, anything else you guys want to add?
Bass Story Tour. We'll be out on tour July 6th, starting on the East Coast through the end of July, beginning of August, across the East Coast and Midwest, doing all these songs live from Sleeping Giants and some other stuff, and supporting the book and the record. So that's David Ellefson, Facebook.com/David Ellefson Bass Story, Facebook.com/David Ellefson for all the dates and tour info. There's also VIPs for all the shows. We have a VIP dinner before each show. You can come hang out with us.
All right, so that's pretty much it. And, look forward to one day seeing you guys in Canada. I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
We'll get up there. That's actually something we're just literally talking about earlier today and even yesterday. We're talking about that, about making our Bass Story debut up into Canada here.
Very, very cool. All right, guys. Thank you for being on the show. A pleasure once again. See you guys soon. And, pick up the book, pick up the LP. Thank you very much.
Say farewell to the future. Get ready